Rain pounded the sleek black limo as it pulled up to the ominous gates of Willow Creek, the private, gated community where the all-powerful Homeowners Association, HOA, reigned supreme. Behind the tinted windows, Tiffany Sinclair, the HOA's ruthless president, steeled herself for the confrontation ahead. Tiffany had spent years cultivating her image as the benevolent face of Willow Creek, but beneath the veneer of respectability lay a dark web of manipulation, blackmail, and corruption. Tonight, she would make an example of the one homeowner who dared to defy her iron-fisted control. As Tiffany strode through the rain towards the community center, the lingering aroma of freshly baked apple pie only heightened the sense of unease. This was no time for suburban pleasantries. Tiffany had a score to settle. Inside, the HOA board members sat in anxious silence, their faces lit by the flickering fluorescent lights. Tiffany's heels clicked on the linoleum floor as she took her seat at the head of the table, her icy gaze sweeping the room. "I trust you all know why I've called this emergency meeting," she said, her voice dripping with barely contained fury. "Our esteemed neighbor, Karen Wilkins, has once again defied the HOA's rules. This time, her blatant disregard for our community's standards has gone too far." The board members exchanged nervous glances, well aware of Tiffany's ruthless reputation. Karen Wilkins, a fiercely independent homeowner who refused to bow to the HOA's whims, had been a thorn in Tiffany's side for years. Karen's decision to start an organic vegetable farm on her property is a direct violation of our covenants, Tiffany continued, her manicured nails tapping the table. "We've given her ample warnings, but she continues to thumb her nose at our authority." Tiffany's eyes narrowed as she produced a thick file, slamming it down on the table. "That's why I'm proposing we take decisive action. I've compiled a dossier of every single infraction Karen has committed, from her unsightly compost pile to her refusal to maintain her lawn at precisely 3 inches. It's time we send a message. No one is above the law in Willow Creek." The board members shifted uncomfortably, sensing the gravity of Tiffany's words. Karen Wilkins was a popular figure in the community, known for her charitable work and her passion for sustainable living. Taking her down would be no easy task. "What exactly are you proposing, Tiffany?" asked one of the board members, his voice barely above a whisper. Tiffany's lips curled into a chilling smile. "Foreclosure," she announced, her tone brooking no argument. "We'll invoke the HOA's powers to seize Karen's property and auction it off to the highest bidder. That will teach her a lesson about defying the rules of Willow Creek." The board members exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared to challenge Tiffany's decision. The HOA president had a reputation for ruthlessly crushing any dissent, and they knew better than to cross her. As the meeting adjourned, Tiffany stepped out into the rain, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. Karen Wilkins had no idea what was about to hit her. This was Tiffany's domain, and she would stop at nothing to maintain her iron grip on Willow Creek. The stage was set for a titanic clash between the HOA's formidable power and Karen's unwavering determination. The outcome would shake the very foundations of the community, setting the stage for a high-stakes showdown that would leave no one unscathed. The rain had long since subsided, but the air in Willow Creek was thick with tension as Karen Wilkins stared down the 4 uniformed officers standing on her doorstep. "This is outrageous," she exclaimed, her face flushed with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You can't just come in here and seize my property without due process." The lead officer, a grizzled veteran with cold eyes, held up a thick stack of papers. "I'm afraid we can't, ma'am. We have a court order authorizing the Willow Creek Homeowners Association to foreclose on your property effective immediately." Karen's heart sank as she scanned the documents, her hands trembling. She had known that her ongoing feud with the HOA would eventually come to a head, but she never imagined they would resort to such underhanded tactics. "This is all a trumped-up mess of lies and fabrications," she protested, her voice rising in desperation. "Tiffany Sinclair and her cronies are behind this. I just know it." The officer shrugged, unmoved by Karen's outrage. "I'm just doing my job, ma'am. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises before we'll be forced to remove you by force." As the officers turned to leave, Karen's gaze landed on the thriving vegetable garden that had become her pride and joy. The thought of losing it, of seeing her life's work destroyed, was almost more than she could bear. Steeling her resolve, Karen rushed back into the house, grabbing her phone and frantically dialing her lawyer. "Jim, it's me," she said, her voice shaking. "The HOA is foreclosing on my property. I need you to file an emergency injunction immediately." Jim's voice was grave. "I'll do what I can, Karen, but you know how powerful the HOA is around here. They've got the courts in their back pocket." Karen gritted her teeth, her knuckles turning white as she clutched the phone. "Then we'll have to fight them another way. I'm not going down without a fight, Jim. Not this time." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the neighborhood in an eerie, golden glow, Karen set to work. She knew she couldn't count on the legal system to save her, not when the HOA had turned it into their own personal playground. Gathering a group of her most trusted neighbors, Karen began to meticulously plan her counterattack. They would uncover the HOA's dirty secrets, expose their corruption, and rally the entire community to stand against Tiffany Sinclair's iron-fisted rule. The hours ticked by as the team pored over documents, interviewed witnesses, and pieced together a damning case against the HOA. Karen could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, fueled by a burning desire for justice. Just as the first rays of dawn began to peek over the horizon, Karen's eyes widened as she stumbled upon a startling discovery. "Jim, get over here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I think I found the smoking gun." As Jim arrived, Karen quickly filled him in on the details, her expression a mix of triumph and trepidation. "If we can prove this, we might just be able to bring the whole house of cards crashing down." Jim's brow furrowed as he absorbed the implications of Karen's findings. "This is big, Karen. Bigger than we ever imagined. Are you sure you're ready to take on the HOA at their own game?" Karen's gaze hardened with steely determination. "I have no choice. They've taken everything from me, Jim. Now it's time for payback." With the sun rising over Willow Creek, the stage was set for an epic showdown between the formidable HOA and the seemingly powerless homeowner. Karen had unearthed a deadly secret, one that could topple the very foundation of the community's power structure. But would it be enough to save her home, or would Tiffany Sinclair's ruthless tactics ultimately prevail? The nondescript van pulled up to the curb, its windows tinted and its engine idling. Tiffany Sinclair stepped out, her designer heels clicking on the pavement, as she made her way towards the ominous-looking building at the heart of Willow Creek. Inside, the HOA's private security team was already hard at work, poring over surveillance footage and monitoring the activities of the community's residents. Tiffany's lips curled into a satisfied smile as she surveyed the state-of-the-art command center, her grip tightening on the file in her hand. "Report," she demanded, her voice sharp and authoritative. One of the team members, a burly man with a shaved head, stepped forward. "We've been monitoring the Wilkins property closely, just as you ordered. It seems they've been gathering evidence and rallying support from the other homeowners." Tiffany's eyes narrowed. "I see. And what have you uncovered?" The security officer hesitated for a moment, sensing the underlying threat in Tiffany's tone. "Well, ma'am, it appears they've discovered some irregularities in the HOA's financial records. Something about a slush fund and kickbacks from local contractors." Tiffany's expression darkened as she opened the file, her perfectly manicured nails skimming over the damning documents. "So the little farm girl thinks she can take on the HOA, does she?" she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. The security officer shifted uncomfortably, well aware of the consequences of failure. "What would you like us to do, ma'am?" Tiffany's gaze hardened as she snapped the file shut. "Silence them, by any means necessary." The officer's eyes widened, but he knew better than to question Tiffany's orders. "Understood. We'll handle it discreetly." As the security team sprang into action, Tiffany returned to her limousine, her mind racing. Karen Wilkins had unwittingly unleashed a force more powerful than she could ever imagine. The HOA's grip on Willow Creek was absolute, and Tiffany would stop at nothing to maintain that control. Back at the Wilkins residence, Karen and her team were huddled around the kitchen table, poring over the evidence they had gathered. Jim, the family's trusted lawyer, was visibly shaken by the revelations. "This is a bombshell, Karen," he said, his voice hushed. "If we can prove the HOA's involvement in these kickbacks and underhanded dealings, it could bring the whole organization crashing down." Karen nodded, her eyes filled with a determined fire. "That's exactly what I'm counting on, Jim. Tiffany Sinclair and her cronies have been getting away with their corruption for far too long. It's time to show them that they're not above the law." As the team continued to strategize, a sudden noise from the backyard caught their attention. Karen's heart raced as she peered out the window, only to see a group of masked figures moving stealthily through the shadows. "Intruders," she hissed, her voice laced with panic. "Jim, call the police now." But before Jim could react, the glass of the kitchen window shattered, and a canister of tear gas came rolling in. Choking on the acrid fumes, the team scrambled to escape, their eyes stinging and their lungs burning. In the chaos, Karen caught a glimpse of a familiar face, Tiffany Sinclair, standing at the edge of the property, a twisted smile on her lips. The message was clear. The HOA would stop at nothing to silence their opposition. As the team stumbled out of the house, coughing and disoriented, they realized the gravity of the situation. The HOA was not just a corrupt organization. It was a ruthless, well-oiled machine, willing to use any means necessary to protect its power. With the police on their way, Karen and her team huddled together, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and determination. They had uncovered a dangerous secret, one that could bring down the entire HOA, but at what cost? The battle lines had been drawn, and the stakes had never been higher. Karen knew that she was facing an enemy far more formidable than she had ever imagined, one that would stop at nothing to crush her and her allies. The morning sun filtered through the grimy windows of the Willow Creek Community Center, casting an eerie glow over the crowd that had gathered. Karen Wilkins stood at the podium, her face a mask of determination as she addressed the room. "My fellow homeowners, I come before you today with a grave warning," she began, her voice strong and unwavering. "The Homeowners Association, the very entity entrusted to protect our community, has been betraying our trust and lining their own pockets." A murmur of shock rippled through the audience as Karen laid out the evidence she and her team had uncovered: the kickbacks, the shady financial dealings, the surveillance network that had been installed without the knowledge or consent of the residents. Tiffany Sinclair and her cronies have turned the HOA into a corrupt, self-serving machine, and they will stop at nothing to maintain their stranglehold on this community, Karen declared, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. The crowd erupted in a chorus of outrage, with homeowners shouting angrily and demanding answers. Tiffany Sinclair, seated in the front row, sat impassively, her icy gaze fixed on Karen. "We must take action, my friends," Karen continued, her voice rising above the din. "We must stand together and reclaim our community from those who would exploit us. The time has come to take back Willow Creek." The crowd roared its approval, and Karen knew that she had struck a chord. The people of Willow Creek were tired of being manipulated and controlled, and they were ready to fight back. As the meeting wound down, Karen caught sight of Tiffany Sinclair slipping out of the room, her expression unreadable. The HOA president's sudden departure only heightened the sense of unease that hung in the air. "Something's not right," Karen murmured to Jim, her brow furrowed with concern. "Tiffany's up to something, I can feel it." Jim nodded grimly. "We need to be on our guard, Karen. The HOA is not going to give up its power without a fight." Back in her luxurious office, Tiffany Sinclair paced the floor, her elegant features twisted with fury. Karen Wilkins had dared to challenge her, and that was unacceptable. She would not allow some upstart homeowner to topple the carefully constructed empire she had built. Picking up the phone, Tiffany dialed a number known only to a select few. "It's time," she said, her voice cold and calculated. "Mobilize the team. I want Karen Wilkins and her little band of rebels silenced permanently." As the sun began to set over Willow Creek, a sense of unease settled over the community. The homeowners, emboldened by Karen's impassioned speech, had begun to organize, planning their own counteroffensive against the HOA. But unbeknownst to them, Tiffany Sinclair had unleashed a sinister force, one that would stop at nothing to protect the HOA's stranglehold on the community. The battle lines had been drawn, and the stakes had never been higher. In the shadows, unseen eyes watched, waited, and plotted. The HOA's reach extended far beyond the confines of Willow Creek, and Karen and her allies were about to learn just how far the organization was willing to go to maintain its power. As the night fell, a sense of foreboding crept over the community, a harbinger of the chaos and upheaval that was to come. The war for the soul of Willow Creek had begun, and no one was safe from the fallout. The air in Willow Creek was thick with tension as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns and pristine streets. Karen Wilkins and her team of homeowner activists huddled around the kitchen table, their faces etched with worry. "We've got to be careful, everyone," Karen warned, her voice low and urgent. "Tiffany Sinclair and the HOA are not going to let us win this fight without a fight of their own." Jim, the team's trusted lawyer, nodded grimly. "Karen's right. We've uncovered some serious corruption within the HOA, and they're not going to take it lying down. We need to be vigilant and prepare for anything." The group fell silent, the weight of their undertaking weighing heavily on their shoulders. They had taken on a formidable foe, one with seemingly unlimited resources and a willingness to use any means necessary to maintain its grip on Willow Creek. Suddenly, a loud noise from the backyard shattered the stillness, and the team jumped to their feet, their hearts racing. Cautiously, they peered out the window, only to be met with the sight of a mysterious figure slipping through the shadows. "There," one of the team members exclaimed, pointing towards the moving silhouette. "We've got an intruder." Before anyone could react, a deafening explosion rocked the house, shattering windows and sending debris flying. Karen and her team hit the floor, coughing and choking on the acrid smoke. When the dust settled, they emerged to find the backyard in ruins, a gaping hole where the vegetable garden had once been. Karen's heart sank as she surveyed the devastation, her eyes burning with tears of rage and anguish. "The HOA," she growled, her fists clenched at her sides. "They've done this, I just know it." Jim placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression grave. "We need to get out of here, Karen. It's not safe anymore." As the team hurried to gather their belongings and evacuate the premises, a black limousine pulled up to the curb, its tinted windows gleaming in the fading light. The door swung open, and Tiffany Sinclair stepped out, a triumphant smirk on her lips. "Well, well, if it isn't the little farm girl and her merry band of troublemakers," Tiffany purred, her voice dripping with malice. "I must say, I'm impressed by your tenacity, Karen. But did you really think you could take on the HOA and win?" Karen stepped forward, her eyes narrowed with fury. "This is your doing, isn't it, Tiffany? You and your thugs blew up my garden, didn't you?" Tiffany's smile widened, her eyes glinting with a predatory gleam. "I warned you, Karen, that no one defies the HOA and gets away with it. But don't worry, the destruction of your precious garden is just the beginning." Karen's face paled as Tiffany produced a thick manila envelope, her perfectly manicured fingers caressing the papers inside. "You see, Karen, we've been watching you and your little team very closely, and we've uncovered some interesting information about your past. Shall we share it with the community?" Karen's heart raced as she realized the implication of Tiffany's words. The HOA had been spying on them, gathering information to use as leverage. She had no doubt that the contents of that envelope could ruin her and her allies, both personally and professionally. "You can't do this, Tiffany," Karen pleaded, her voice trembling. "This isn't about me or my team. It's about the future of Willow Creek. Don't you see that?" Tiffany's expression hardened, her eyes cold and merciless. "I'm afraid I do see, Karen, and the future of Willow Creek belongs to the HOA. You and your little revolution are just a minor annoyance, one that I'm more than happy to crush." As the limousine pulled away, Karen and her team were left standing in the rubble of their shattered dreams, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. The battle lines had been drawn, and the stakes had never been higher. The sun had long since set over Willow Creek, but the streets remained eerily quiet. Karen Wilkins paced the floor of her temporary safe house, her mind racing with a whirlwind of emotions. "They're going to destroy us, Jim," she said, her voice laced with fear and desperation. "Tiffany and the HOA have dug up something from my past, and they're going to use it to ruin everything we've worked for." Jim, the team's trusted lawyer, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We knew this was going to be a tough fight, Karen. But we can't give up, not now. We've come too far." Karen nodded, her jaw set with determination. "You're right. I'm not going down without a fight. But we need to find out what Tiffany has on us, and we need to do it fast." The team huddled around the table, poring over every scrap of information they had managed to gather. The HOA's web of corruption and deceit was more extensive than they had ever imagined, and the thought of facing such a formidable adversary was daunting. Suddenly, one of the team members, a young woman named Emma, let out a gasp. "Guys, I think I found something." All eyes turned to her as she explained her discovery. Tiffany Sinclair's family had a long history of involvement in shady real estate deals, and the HOA president herself had been a key player in a controversial project that had displaced dozens of low-income families. "This is it." Karen breathed, her eyes alight with hope. "If we can expose Tiffany's involvement in that scandal, it could bring the whole HOA crashing down." Jim nodded, his expression grim. "But we'll need solid evidence, Karen. Tiffany's not going to go down without a fight, and she's got the courts and the local government in her pocket." The team fell silent, the weight of their task weighing heavily on their shoulders. They knew that they were up against a powerful and ruthless adversary, one that would stop at nothing to maintain its grip on Willow Creek. As the night wore on, the team worked tirelessly, piecing together a comprehensive case against Tiffany and the HOA. They scoured financial records, interviewed former residents, and uncovered a web of bribery and corruption that stretched far beyond the borders of the community. Finally, as the first rays of dawn began to peek over the horizon, Emma let out a triumphant cry. "I've got it, the smoking gun that will take Tiffany down for good." The team gathered around, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Karen's eyes widened as she reviewed the evidence, a grim determination settling over her features. "It's time," she said, her voice firm and unwavering. "We're going to take this to the press, and we're going to blow the lid off the HOA's dirty little secrets." As the team prepared to unleash their explosive revelations, a sense of unease crept over them. They knew that Tiffany Sinclair and the HOA would not go down without a fight, and the consequences of their actions could be dire. But Karen was resolute. She had come too far to back down now, and she was willing to risk everything to save her beloved community from the clutches of the corrupt organization that had terrorized it for far too long. With the evidence in hand, the team set out, determined to expose the truth and reclaim the soul of Willow Creek. The final showdown was about to begin, and the stakes had never been higher. The air in the Willow Creek Community Center was electric with tension as Karen Wilkins and her team of homeowner activists took the stage. Tiffany Sinclair and the members of the HOA board sat, their expressions a mix of unease and defiance. Karen's voice rang out, clear and unwavering, as she laid bare the sordid details of the HOA's corruption. For years, the Willow Creek Homeowners Association has operated as a well-oiled machine of greed and deceit, exploiting the very community it was meant to serve. The audience, a mix of stunned homeowners and curious onlookers, listened in rapt silence as Karen and her team presented a damning array of evidence. Financial records, witness testimonies, and even video footage all pointed to a web of kickbacks, bribery, and collusion between the HOA and local contractors. Tiffany Sinclair and her cronies have used their positions of power to line their own pockets, all while subjecting us, the residents of Willow Creek, to unjust rules and unfair treatment. Karen continued, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. As the revelations unfolded, the atmosphere in the room grew increasingly tense. Tiffany Sinclair sat impassively, her icy gaze fixed on Karen, while the other board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But the worst part, Karen said, her voice lowering to a somber tone, is that the HOA's corruption has extended beyond our community. They've been complicit in the displacement of dozens of low-income families, all to line the pockets of their wealthy developer friends. This bombshell elicited a collective gasp from the audience, and Tiffany Sinclair's composure finally slipped. Her face flushed with anger as she rose from her seat, her hands trembling. "This is an outrageous lie," she shouted, her voice shrill and desperate. "The Willow Creek Homeowners Association has always acted in the best interests of our community. These accusations are nothing more than the desperate ramblings of a bitter homeowner who can't accept the rules we put in place." Karen simply shook her head, her expression a mix of pity and determination. "The evidence speaks for itself, Tiffany. Your reign of terror is over. It's time for the residents of Willow Creek to take back their community." The crowd erupted in a thunderous roar of approval, their voices mingling with the sound of a dozen cameras clicking as the media captured the dramatic confrontation. Tiffany Sinclair's face crumpled with fury, and she turned to the security guards who had been stationed at the back of the room. "Arrest them," she shrieked. "All of them. They're trespassing on HOA property and disrupting our meeting." But the guards hesitated, their eyes darting between Tiffany and the defiant homeowners. They knew that the tide had turned, and that siding with the HOA in the face of such damning evidence would only cast them as complicit in the organization's misdeeds. As the security guards refused to intervene, Tiffany's panic turned to pure terror. She realized that her carefully constructed empire was crumbling around her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. In a last-ditch effort, she made a desperate dash for the exit, but Karen and her team were quick to block her path. "Going somewhere, Tiffany?" Karen asked, her voice dripping with a triumphant venom. Tiffany's eyes darted wildly, her perfectly coiffed facade crumbling as she realized the full extent of her defeat. The residents of Willow Creek had risen up, and they were no longer willing to be cowed by the HOA's tyranny. As Tiffany was led away in handcuffs, the crowd erupted in a deafening roar of victory. The battle for Willow Creek had been won, and a new era of community empowerment and transparency was about to begin. The streets of Willow Creek were alive with a palpable sense of change as the community celebrated its hard-won victory over the corrupt Homeowners Association. Karen Wilkins, the once-embattled homeowner who had spearheaded the resistance, stood at the center of it all, her eyes shining with a mix of pride and relief. In the aftermath of the dramatic public confrontation, the HOA's downfall had been swift and decisive. Tiffany Sinclair, the once revered HOA president, had been arrested on a litany of charges, from embezzlement and fraud to racketeering and abuse of power. The revelations that had poured forth at the community center had been a devastating blow, not just to the HOA, but to the very foundation of Willow Creek's power structure. Residents who had once been cowed by the organization's iron-fisted rule now felt empowered, their voices finally heard and their concerns addressed. "It's a new day in Willow Creek," Karen declared, addressing a crowd of eager homeowners. "No longer will we be beholden to a corrupt and self-serving HOA. From now on, the community will have a say in how our neighborhood is run." The enthusiastic cheers that greeted her words were music to Karen's ears. She had fought long and hard to bring down the HOA, and the sense of vindication was palpable. But even as she reveled in the moment, a nagging sense of unease crept into the back of her mind. "Jim, I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over," she confided to her trusted lawyer, her brow furrowed with concern. "Tiffany and the HOA had their hands in a lot of dirty business, and I can't help but wonder what other skeletons might be lurking in the closet." Jim nodded, his expression grave. "I agree, Karen. We've taken down the tip of the iceberg, but there's no telling how deep the corruption goes. We need to stay vigilant and make sure that the new HOA leadership is truly committed to transparency and accountability." As the community set about the task of rebuilding and restructuring the Homeowners Association, Karen and her team continued to dig, determined to uncover every last shred of evidence that could help them secure a lasting victory. And then, just when they thought they had unearthed the last of the HOA's secrets, a startling revelation came to light. a connection between Tiffany Sinclair and a shadowy figure from the past, a powerful real estate developer with a history of dubious dealings. This goes deeper than we ever imagined, Karen breathed, her eyes widening as she pored over the documents. Tiffany wasn't just acting on her own. She had powerful allies, people who stood to benefit from the HOA's corruption. The team sprang into action, working around the clock to trace the web of connections and uncover the full extent of the conspiracy. As they dug deeper, they uncovered a trail of bribery, intimidation, and even murder, all in the name of preserving the HOA's stranglehold on Willow Creek. "We can't let this stand," Karen said, her voice filled with a renewed sense of determination. "The people of Willow Creek deserve the truth, and we're going to give it to them, no matter what it takes." With renewed vigor, the team of homeowner activists set out to expose the full scope of the HOA's corruption, determined to ensure that the community's hard-won victory was not just a temporary triumph, but a lasting change that would transform Willow Creek for generations to come. The battle lines had been redrawn, and the stakes had never been higher. But Karen Wilkins and her allies were ready, their resolve strengthened by the knowledge that they were fighting for the very soul of their community. The final showdown was about to begin, and the outcome would determine the future of Willow Creek for years to come.